Okay, we are back from our break. Now, at this point, just go ahead and choose which plate you want to keep, and I would just trash the other one, and really, I don't care which one you choose. So I'll keep my NURBS plate, I'll destroy my polygon plate, but again, that doesn't really matter too much. Make sure you can select surfaces. When you're happy, delete out that curve, because there's a funny thing about doing this. If you take a look over in my channel box right now, notice we have the revolve, we have all the the shape node and whatnot. If I delete this curve, that's the same as deleting history for this surface. So I now no longer have construction history. So make sure you're happy with the shape before you actually delete that curve. Now, I'm going to hit Control S and save my scene. Also, let's go to Window and open up the hypergraph hierarchy. We really only have two objects in our scene at this point. The first one is our plane, and then we have a revolved surface, but these names don't really mean much, so let's rename these objects. We'll take P-plane 1, and I'm going to come over here to the channel box and click on its name, and we'll just name this Table. Revolved surface, excuse me, makes a lot of sense to just name that Plate. Now I'm going to select my table and hit Control-Shift-H. This is a common a common paradigm that you'll see in Maya. We hit Control-H to hide that surface. So you hit Control-H and it goes away. Shift-H is kind of like the opposite, and you'll see this a lot. So if you hit Control-Shift-H, that'll bring it back. It's just like when you undo something, you can hit Z and then Shift-Z to redo. So in a lot of cases, you'll see that a key will perform one option, then Shift in that key will perform the opposite option. All right, so I'll go ahead and close out the hypergraph. I want to take my plate and put it back down on the floor. So I'm going to jump over to the side view, get my move tool out, and you'll notice something about my move tool. You see that it's positioned down below? This is because the pivot point of this object has been moved kind of far away. We created it up here, and by default, whenever you make a new NURBS object, its pivot point is going to automatically be at the origin. So what I want you to do is go to Modify and choose Center Pivot. Then just take your plate and set it back down on the surface. Now the only problem I have with this is that right now our translate Y is at negative 7.367 in my case. But my plate is sitting right on top of the bottom of my scene, being the surface of the table. So what I'm going to do is go to Modify, go to Freeze Transformations. And all that did is that reset all of my translates back to 0. So now, anytime I move the plate, if I zero it out, it goes back to this position. Okay, so with that done, we are ready to build our cake. It is cake making time. Who's ready to make a cake? Tell me in BuzzNet, who's ready to make a cake? Well, you're all going to be really disappointed because what we're going to make tonight looks a bit like a cake and a bit like a stack of pancakes. It won't really look all that amazing until we get to the material side of things. Now, that's one of those things you're going to have to just be a little bit patient on. All we're going to do is build the basis for the cake. We're going to build its primary structure. And then later on, we're going to add icing by way of bump mapping so it looks like somebody dragged a knife through it and whipped it around and made it look all kinds of cool. Okay. Now, here's where we're going to get a little bit fancy. What I want you to do is select your plate, go to Modify, and choose Make Live. Next, I want you to go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and this time I'm not giving you a choice. I mean, I could, but I'm not going to. We're going to make a polygon cylinder for our cake. We could make it out of NURBS, though, come to think of it, but we're not gonna. Now it says drag on the base of the grid and pull up for height. You are basically, now you're building right on the plate. So watch this. If you go right to the center of your plate and drag outward, you'll end up with a cylinder that is right in the middle of your plate. Now, exact heights, exact widths, they're completely arbitrary. I really don't care how big you make your cake. Then it says, I can't find my floor. I think I hide it at the beginning. You probably did hide it at the beginning. You can go to Window, Hypergraph Hierarchy, and you should see it here. It should be a node that is pale gray. You shouldn't have too much in your scene right now anyway. So you should be able to find it, select it, and hit Control-Shift-H. If you don't see it, it's because it doesn't exist, in which case you just need to make another one. I mean, in the end, it was just a polygon plane. It should take you all of 2, maybe even a whole 3 seconds to build another one. Maybe 3. Probably not, though. Yeah, it's possible you hit the delete key. I've seen people do this. Okay, so once you have your cylinder in place, we're going to do a few things. This is pretty easy, actually. Yeah, if you press delete, you just need to make another one. But it's a real easy thing. Just make a plane. And if you want to just forget about it and make one later, you can do that too. Because you can wait all the way until we go to make the actual surface, like the texture and material, and then make one real fast. So, no biggie. All right. So now, take your cake and make sure you name this. Let's go to the top of the channel box right now, and we'll name this cake. We're going to take our subdivision's height and just increase the daylight out of this. In fact, I'm going to set mine up to about, well, 40 is way too high. That's just ridiculous. Let's try 30. 30 might work. 25. 25 is looking better. Can I get all the way down to 20? 20 might be a little bit too low, but we could try it. Let's just try 20. I don't want to make things too dense. So 20 subdivisions in height. Now let's take our subdivision caps, and we're going to increase that as well. Let's go with, I don't know, 16. We'll build up kind of slowly. Ooh, 16 actually looks really good. That's pretty amazing. Now, you don't need to worry too much about subdivisions axes. 20 is probably good because we're going to be smoothing this out anyway. So let's go ahead and leave it at that. If you just feel the urge to have some more, you could probably create it, but I don't think it'll help you really in any way. My table was showing in the hypershade, but it wouldn't show, so I clicked on the hypershade show and got it back in case others have the same problem. You can do that if you're really, really stuck. If you have something that you have hidden and you just can't seem to bring it back, you can go on show, and you can just choose show selected or just objects. Show this guy. Actually, that's not even right. Let's just right-click on it. That's generally what I do. Right-click and just choose show, and that brings it up. There's a couple of other things as well. You can go, even if you've been doing other things, this is kind of a handy little command to know. You can go to, display, show, last hidden, and that'll take the last thing you hid, and that'll bring that back without even having to select it, which is kind of fancy. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways. Or you can just go to display, show, and choose show all. The only catch is that will actually show your perspective cameras as well. And so if you're like, what are these green floaty things in my scene? Those are your perspective cameras. You basically just unhid those by showing all. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure everything is deselected. I'm going to go to Modify, Make Not Live to switch live off on my plate. There's a few things I want to do here. We have a whole lot of faces on the underside of this cake that we don't need. I don't like that. So I've lifted my cake up into the air, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over here to one of the side views. Hold down the right mouse button and go to Faces, and drag out a marquee selection box around the underside of my cake. You'll notice I've even got this little ring of faces here across the very bottom, and I don't even care. I'm just going to hit delete and nuke those out. This won't even be a solid cake. It's just going to be a shell that happens to look like a little bit like a cake. What did Make Live actually do? Instead of telling, why don't I show you? Watch this. Modify Make Live on the cake. Now I'm going to go to Pyramids. Watch me make pyramids. Do you see what it's doing? Can you tell me what Make Live just did now? Ty, you're not answering me. What is Make Live doing? It treats the object like the origin. Actually, that's close. It treats the object like the grid. So now you can basically make objects right on the surface of this object. So we'd used it on the plate so we could create our cake right on top of the plate. How do I make not live? Deselect everything in your scene and go back to modify and just choose make not live. How do I select all the bottom faces of the cake? By going into one of the side views, selecting your cake, choosing faces, marquee selecting all those faces, like so, and hitting the delete key. I'm sure there is an icon for Make Live. If not, I mean, I can make one real fast. I can hold down Control and Shift and just go to Modify and choose Make Live, and that just made one right there. Okay, now we're going to make the top of this cake look a whole lot cooler. Here's how we do it. I'm going to hold down the right mouse button and grab Vertices, or Vertex. And I'm going to grab this one vertex right in the center of my cake. Then I'm going to hold down the B key and middle mouse drag outward. And you see that grows out toward the edge? I basically want to get about halfway down the cake. Chirac, if you're having problems like that, it may be a problem with the software. You could try jumping out and jumping back in real quick, because that sounds really weird. Steven, you can just ask once. You can hold down the B key and middle mouse drag to the right, and that'll increase the radius. This is for soft selection, so if I start moving my mouse, you can kind of see what this does. So it's like I can make my cake sink in the middle because it's a bad cake. I didn't put enough, I don't know, something in it. I'm not a baker. So, once again, I'm going to select the vertex right here in the center of the cake, hold down the B key, drag that out. I'll go ahead and let it grab pretty much all the vertices. Maybe out to about here, I suppose. Now, here's the trick. Yours will probably look a little bit different. Because mine, oh, look, Zach has a perfect cake, and all he did was move his mouse. And yours, if I had to fancy a guess, probably looks something like this. Or, I don't know, it depends on what you've been playing with. I mean, it could look something like this, which is useless. I'm making a bundt cake. What we're going to do is make a custom curve to control this fall off. So, once you hold down the B key and you middle mouse drag about halfway down the body of the cake, I want you to open up your tool options, and you can do that by clicking on this little wrench button up here in the upper right hand corner of your interface. Like so. And if you scroll down, because you have all the different move tool settings, if you scroll down, you'll see the soft selection area, which will probably be on right now. All we have to do is just reshape this curve. And here's how it works. You just click right here on this curve and start pulling these points around with your mouse. And you can make all kinds of outlandish shapes. So if I do something like this, watch what we get. So you can see how that works. It's kind of like defining a cross-section, just like we did with our plate. So let's undo that. I'll set it back to default, and what I'm going to do is draw out something about like so. Now you see how I'm getting this smooth interpolation? That's a problem. So I'm going to undo, actually. Let's click on my first point and set its interpolation to spline interpolation. And make sure all of the points you add are set to spline interpolation, and that'll make everything just look better. And really that's it right there. You're just making sort of a nice little rounding, like a little rounded corner. There's no real wrong answer here. You see the shape that I've just designed. Now with that shape, when I pull up, I get a nice rising cake. Incidentally, I'm stretching out the edges and I'm not really happy with this, so I'm actually going to fix this here in just a minute, probably by deleting most of this detail and adding it again in a different way. But that's cool. It just allows you to see a couple of different ways to go about this. Really, all I'm looking at is the very, very, very top surface here. I want this to look nicely rounded. Is everybody still with me? Let's do a quick ready check and see who's got this. Looking pretty good. I can't select the top half. Okay. Well, I'm not sure what you mean. So if you would, put an official question, you can't select the top half of the cylinder. Well, we didn't ever select the top half of the cylinder, really. All we did is made sure that we were in vertex mode. We selected a single vertex at the very center, and then we held down the B key and middle mouse drag to increase the soft selection radius. Okay. Now it looks like most folks have this. I'm going to do something a little bit dangerous, a little bit scary. Watch this. I'm going to go to the side view, and I'm going to turn off my tool settings. They're just getting in my way now. This is going to be really freaky for some of you out there. I'm going to go to Faces. I'm going to grab all of the faces at the sides of my cake. Let's hit B so you can see which ones I have selected. It's pretty much all of my faces, and I'm going to delete them. All I have now is the top of a cake. How do you change the weight on soft selection? Hold down B and middle mouse drag. I think I already said that. But if I didn't, there you go again. Now, I'm going to select these edges. My problem, if you're wondering why I'm doing all this, I felt that that made my cake a little bit too tall. So I'm going to basically rebuild the sides of the cake really, really quickly. So watch. Shift right mouse, now that I have edges selected, notice it no longer says extrude face, it says extrude edge. Please keep the following in mind. Does everybody remember a few moments ago when we went over to our mesh menu set and we turned off keep faces together? You might want to turn that on in this case. Make sure keep faces together is on or you'll regret it later and you'll cry and well, anyway. So shift right mouse, go to extrude edge. Now, somebody asked this earlier, I believe it was oh, I'm terrible with names. Veliko may have asked it. We have this little tiny floating button out here above our extrude widget. It allows you to switch between world and local space. Click that once to go to world space, and then pull straight down, and you can rebuild the sides of your cake real fast. Now, it doesn't have all those edges on the side of it, but I don't want you to stress about that. Just pull it down. Then you can go into your extrusion settings, and if at this point, if you forgot to turn keep faces together on, you need to do it in the tool. They must be together right now. Then you can take your divisions and just crank those up. So maybe take that to, I don't know, 20. Let me see if I can get away with fewer than that. Let me see if I can do maybe, well, I am about to sculpt it. So I'll leave it, and if I have too many, then that's okay for a project of this nature. And there we go. I have a cake. I can just pull this right back down on my plate. It can even poke down a little bit into my plate, and that's perfectly acceptable. The last thing I'm going to do, does everybody see this hard edge around the edge of the cake? This is due to what are called vertex normals. And it's kind of a pain. I mean, it's there, but it's kind of not there. So what we're going to do is just select your cake, shift right mouse. You'll see soften, harden, edge. Choose that and choose soften edge, and it'll get rid of that for you. How do I get world axis? When you're extruding, just do a quick extrusion. It's this little tiny floating circle kind of out here all by itself, sort of rejected and lonely up above the extrude tool. Click that, and that switches you to world coordinates. Okay, ready, check. Who's got a cake on a plate right now? If you're still making your cake on a plate, give me a 1 minute on your status, and I'm going to pause the video. Okay, so you've got a cake, but it still has some flaws. If you deselect it, it might have a few ridges. I mean, you can see that mine does. That soft selection bit is hard to get perfectly right. So here's how we're going to fix that. I want you to select your cake. Hold down, well, actually, before you do anything, delete your history. See all this stuff? It needs to go away. Edit, delete by type, history. Oh, if I get called Zach Morris one more time in my life. Okay, I'm going to hold down the right mouse button and go down to Paint and jump down to Sculpt. And now we're going to sculpt for a while. Now, this is called Maya Artisan. It's a full-featured sculpt tool. It was around long before ZBrush ever existed. It's nowhere near as robust as ZBrush, but it is pretty nifty all the same. Here's a quick rundown of how to use it. Hold down the B key and middle mouse drag to change the size of your brush. Over in your tool settings, you have the ability to push, pull, smooth, relax, pinch, and erase. Your two big ones will be push and pull. And here's kind of how they work. Currently I have this set to pull, and you see that I am indeed pulling outward from the surface. Each time I paint with the mouse, we're pulling out a little bit. If you hold down the Control key, you'll do the opposite. So I can pull, and then I can hold down Control, and I'm pushing back in. You can also hold down the Shift key, and you can smooth, but you have to be careful of that because smoothing is generally a pretty heavy thing. I don't think I've ever seen, even ZBrush, smoothing just seems to be really, really strong. The tool is located, well, there's a lot of ways to get to it. The way I want you to get to it right now is to hold down the right mouse button, go to Paint, and choose Sculpt. So once again, right mouse, Paint, Sculpt. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. You see these funny ridges I've got because of that soft selection? I'm going to switch myself over to the smooth brush, and I'm going to take the opacity of the brush and turn it down. That's the overall strength, by the way. There's also max displacement. That controls your opacity. Well, that controls the strength of the brush as well. Max displacement controls how far your vertices can move. Opacity is kind of a multiplier for that value. And I'm going to click Flood a few times, and that is very softly smoothing out my mesh. You see those ridges starting to become a lot less pronounced each time I click Flood. Incidentally, my cake is shrinking a little bit, but that's okay. Next, I'm going to hold down the B key and make my brush kind of small and switch to Pull. And then I'm just going to go around the edge of the cake, and maybe even a little smaller than that. I'm just going to go all the way around the edge, pulling out a ridge, and that's really too far. So let me take my max displacement. I'm going to pull it down, pull my opacity down. I'm a big fan of having very subtle strokes that kind of build up. Hushwick. And then let's pull this down, pull that down. So maybe somewhere right about here. And all I'm doing is just shaping out some kind of subtle ridges around the edge of the cake. You don't have to draw in perfectly straight lines. In fact, it'll look better if you don't. So if your hand wavers up and down a little bit, yeah, just go with it. It's probably making your cake look better anyway. Now, currently, I just realized this. This is an older setting that I should have probably reset the tool. You guys are probably seeing something that looks kind of like this. You're wondering why my wireframe is on the shaded? Because I went down to the display settings in the tool and turned off show wireframe because I find it to be kind of annoying. So forgive me for not noticing that I hadn't reset the tool in a minute and a half. And there you go. So I'll switch back to pull and just pull these out. Add a nice little bulge to the very bottom of the cake. Now, you can take those little seams in the middle, and if you want to, you can hold down Control and push those in and make them a little more pronounced. Just be careful, because you can make this look way too much like a stack of pancakes. There is stylus support, and it's really, really good. That's where you get like radius U and radius L. Those are your low pressure or your low pressure sensitivity and your upper pressure sensitivity. So the more you push down on the surface, it'll change between those two radii, which is very, very nice. And you can also change what stylus pressure is going to control. So if you have it and you want to use one, by all means go ahead. I'm going to hold down Shift and kind of smooth out the top of my cake a little bit. Then, just as a nice little added feature, add some irregularities to the top of your cake. Don't leave it perfectly flat on top. Just make some kind of lumps and bumps and then smooth those out. Goodbye, Creative HD. So there you go. I just made some irregularities all over my cake. And there you go. So here's a quick ready check to see who's got this. Okay, the last thing we're going to do for the cake. I'd kind of debated adding in the whipped cream now or later. And I'm kind of two minds. So we'll go ahead and add it, but I may change my mind and redo it later or something. I don't know. It just depends on a few things. So let's go ahead and talk about creating our whipped cream. We're going to create our whipped cream using a feature of Maya known as paint effects. And here's how this works. It's a multi-part process. First, press your F6 key to go to your rendering menu set. Now, once you've done that, you'll see the paint effects menu. With your cake selected, choose Make Paintable. That'll be important. Next, go back to your paint effects menu set and choose Get Brush. This will bring up the visor. As a slight warning, and this is in no way a slam to anybody, I have occasionally known the visor to crash Maya. So, hit Control S. I'm not saying it does in Maya 2013. It could be something they've fixed, but I've seen it happen before, so, you know, a little bit of paranoia goes a long way. Now, there's all kinds of fun stuff that you can paint. Here's an intestinal flow. This actually looks like intestines that are moving matter around inside them. I kid you not. So there's all kinds of fun stuff that you can add if you so desire. Really, it doesn't matter which one of these you grab. We got the visor from going under Paint Effects and choosing Get Brush, and that'll bring up the visor automatically. Now, I'm actually pretty sure that when I created my very first bit of whipped cream, I did it with the smooth skin, which just kind of looks like a tube of flesh. But really, all I was looking for is something very basic. Incidentally, you can grab some of the oils, and you can get some of the thicker ones and start doing writing on top of your cake. Or maybe it was putty paint that I used. That looks vaguely familiar. I did not use the thick oil white, if you're curious, and here's why. So if you grab the putty paint, just select that. Then you can paint on the surface, and it should be making some kind of a stroke. Now mine is flashing down to the very bottom. Let me see why that is, because it shouldn't be. I'm going to make sure my cake is selected. I hit Q to grab my select tool. Selected my cake, Paint Effects, Make Paintable. I want to make sure this is what we're painting on. And we're still kind of flying down to the bottom there. Alright, well, let's figure out why Maya's being a little silly right now. I shouldn't have to make the cake live. That's what Make Paintable does. It handles that for me. And you can see it's trying. It's actually doing a really good job of drawing on the surface of the cake. It's just when I release, it's flying down to the bottom, and it really shouldn't be doing that. So what I'm going to do real quick, and this may not have anything to do with the problem, but I've used this tool so many times and I haven't actually seen this. So I'm going to hit Control S and save, and I'm just going to dive out of Maya and dive right back in again. And make sure I'm in my recent project. Make sure I grab my recent file. Then select my cake, Make Paintable, Get Brush, and what did I go? I went under Oils and I grabbed puttypaint.mel. And it's still kind of flying to the bottom. Is there anybody else? Okay, we do have some people having the same problem. Is there anybody else who's not having the same problem? Mine works fine. Okay, so it's just kind of in this particular case, intermittent problem. All right, well, let's see here. Let me try something real quick. I'm going to try to just diagnose the problem live. Let me make a duplicate of the cake with Control D. We're going to fly out here and make this one paintable. And it keeps flying to there, which is really, really odd and shouldn't be happening for any reason whatsoever. There shouldn't be any history on this because it's a duplicate, so I don't have to worry about that. Let me pull my tool window out of the way. Okay, well, when you get lemons, I have another way we can get around this. It's a workaround for those of you who are having the same issue that I am. Though, to be fair, I haven't ever seen this before. Usually when I'm painting something, it just works. Did that do it? Okay, paint at depth being off seemed to have an effect over it. But that is causing problems because we want to draw right on the surface of the mesh, so let's not use that. It could be because it's hollow, but I've been able to paint on hollow objects before. Using that as a basis for solution, though, I could try filling this hole and then just see if it quits giving me grief, and if it does, then we'll have the answer. Nope, still flies down to there. Well, let me try deleting out history at that point. Nope, still flying down to there. So I'll go ahead and undo that. Put that back where it was. Okay. Let's reset the tool. Alright, that didn't do it. Let me try getting another brush. I doubt this should... I mean, this shouldn't have anything to do with it, but, you know. Where's some really fun ones? Nope, still flying down there to the bottom. So I'm not sure what's making all of my strokes kind of fly away. I have not seen this behavior before. However, there is a way around it. What I'm going to do is paint on something else and then just transfer the stroke over, because we don't really need to put the whipped cream right here in this particular case. So we'll just work with what we got. So I'm going to select a table. We'll put our whipped cream on the table and move it around from there. I don't know why we have to do this, but we're going to do it anyway. So we'll make the table paintable. That is an important first step. Choose Get Brush, and I don't want to make intestines anymore. Let's go back to Oils, and I'll grab this little putty paint brush. And that's working just fine. That is what it should look like. It should just stick right to the surface. Okay, so with that, knowing that that is actually working, we need to make a few changes. We have Pressure Map 1, which is just using our scale, and I'm not actually using my stylus. So I'm going to use my max pressure to increase the size of my brush. So you see how I did that. I set Pressure Max 1 to 5, which is currently mapped to scale. And now, you see how that works. So what I'm going to do in my case, and just because I want mine to look kind of pretty, you can use a stylus, and I just have a steadier hand with it. just kind of go around in a swirl. And there you go. Just make a little swirl of icing. Or whipped cream, if you want to look at it that way. If you have a stylus, please note that scale does allow you to use pressure, so you can hold down. You can start with like a really, really soft stroke. So here I am being very, very gentle, and it's very, very small. And then the harder I press, the bigger that stroke gets, which is very, very neat. I'm just going to coil around and around and around and around and around and around. Like so. Now, once you have that, when you're happy with a little coil of whipped cream that you've made, this is really just a stroke, which is it's an object kind of unto itself. It has a pivot point. You can go to Modify and choose Center Pivot, and you can actually move this guy around. So when you're happy with it, you can just take it and plop it down right on top of the center of your cake. You can also resize it if you want to, though it needs to be done uniformly, because what you're doing is resizing a curve. Now, what I want you to do from here, though, is something kind of fancy. We're not going to keep this as a paint effect stroke. Would you like to see why? I can see you, Keeve. Remember, please keep official questions over in the webinar system. It's very, very difficult for me to keep track sometimes. My tool settings window is missing. How can I get it to open? Please remember in the upper right-hand corner of the interface, there's a little tiny wrench button. That should open it back up for you. When I let go of LMB after drawing, it turns into a line. I can't see the pink. Make sure that you have the appropriate brush selected. So I'll go ahead and draw another one real quick. So just one more time on the table. We'll make sure that we set that to make paintable. Get our brush. Under Oils, choose Putty Paint. We can close the visor at that point. Open up your Tools window. Now I set my pressure max up pretty high, and that allowed me to have a much thicker stroke. And then you just click and drag with a mouse, and that should make your stroke. The only reason it might not would be perhaps if you are not showing paint effects for some reason. So if you turn off strokes, then those will go away. So you don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. Now, here's the catch to using paint effects. It's kind of a problem that we have to overcome. Keith says the outside mesh isn't visible. All right, I have to take over your screen. Now, I have a hard time with usernames and real names, so who are you exactly? Kevin. Make sure, hopefully I only have one Kevin in this class. Sometimes I have more than one. Oh, here we go. What you got for me, Kevin? I really wish folks had a microphone. Okay, so it's drawing and then it's disappearing. It looks like you may be running into something similar to what I was running to on that other object. Because it looks like it's there and then it's vanishing out, which is kind of interesting. Oh, on your tool settings, check Draw as Mesh. Paint again. There you go. That's all it was. And we are back. Okay, here's our problem, finally. If we render out with Mental Ray, which is our plan in the end, Mental Ray does not see paint effects. So what I want you to do is to select your Paint Effects stroke, go to Modify, Convert, and we're going to convert this. And there's a few different ways we could convert it. Let me see what happens when we convert it to polygons. We'll probably end up having to use NURBS. So Paint Effects to polygons, and we get this. Actually, that looks pretty good, all things considered, because it's the shape that I'm really chasing. Let's go to Modify and center that pivot. And push that down into the cake just a little bit. Yeah, that's actually looking very nice. Now, the cool thing about working this way is that you also have a couple of other cool features because this is a polygon surface. We can grab a single vertex here, hold down B, and do that soft selection thing, and we can turn this into kind of more of a pile of whipped cream using soft selection. Let me show you something else too. In your soft selection settings, you can set the fall off mode to surface. Watch this. So now, as I start to pull that up, actually pulls up from the sensor. If yours is now transparent for whatever reason, do not worry about it. We'll solve that in just a minute. Mine wasn't, but that's okay. You're not going to be keeping that material anyway. As a matter of fact, if yours is transparent or if it isn't, either way, do this. Hold down the right mouse on it, choose Assign Existing Material, and assign Lambert 1 to it. And then it won't be a problem anymore. Then one more time, just to show you how we're kind of remodeling that piece of whipped cream, grab a vertex toward the center of your little hunk of whipped cream here. Then, under your tool settings, so open your tool settings window back up, scroll down to soft selection, turn on soft select, and make sure fall off mode is set to surface and not volume. Now what that's going to do is the fall off is going to snake around the surface. Maybe to about there. There we go. So not quite to the end. And then we can just pull up and you get a nice pile of whipped cream instead of just like a flat coil of it. WAS, as I mentioned a second ago, to solve the translucent problem, for now just hold down the right mouse button, choose Assign Existing Material, and just choose Lambert 1. Okay, so there you go. You've got a cake. So I want to do a quick ready check to see who's got a cake now. And in the interim, just because I was paused at the moment, we did have a question about selecting the actual stroke. If you've painted it on the table and you're having a hard time with that, you may need to select it using Marquee Select and possibly deselect whatever surface that you had at the same time. When you try to move it, please note that its pivot is by default going to be at the origin. So you're going to go to Modify and choose Center Pivot and move that over here so that you have access to it again. Okay, it looks like most folks now have a cake, so I want to go ahead and create our cherry. To create the cherry, let's go right up above the cake. And we'll get to where we can see the little piece of whipped cream. I'm going to build this kind of the same way we built the second plate. We're going to do a cross-section curve. So let's go to Create, CD Curve, and I want this to go a little bit more quickly. Hopefully now you got a little bit of experience. So here's how you do this. Hold down X for grid snap and just click right there on one of the grid points. Now you don't have to hold any other keys. Well, okay, hold down Shift, and that'll create a point directly across from this one so you get a nice flat surface right here. Then release Shift. It's now time for you to draw a little bit. So what I want you to do is create half of a cross section of a cherry. If you don't really know what a cherry looks like, I say fake it. Pretend that you know. When you get down here to the bottom, simply hold down Shift and X together, and that will create one last point on the grid directly across from your last point. And you're good to go. So you can press Enter. Then if you need to make any adjustments, you can do that at this stage. Oh, remember soft selection does work for NURBS as well, so you might need to hit B to turn that off. If you're having a hard time visualizing what this cherry is going to look like this early on, just go ahead, jump back to object mode, go back to your surfaces menu set with F4, and just revolve it. And then you can automatically take a look and see what it looks like. I did the last point with Shift and X. Let me just draw the whole curve again. So watch. Start off by holding X. That puts one point right on the grid, right at the center line, because that makes everything easier. Hold down Shift and create the next point directly across from that. That just means you get a nice flat surface right here at the inside. Then just click some points and draw a cherry, or half a cherry. The last point, hold down Shift and hold down X. That's doing two things at once. That's snapping back to the grid, but it's also making sure that that last point is directly across from the original to give you a nice flattened surface on the bottom. And there you go. Press Enter, and you've got your curve. Then, of course, take a moment if you like and pull your control vertices around to reshape a few things. You can do that before or after the revolve, whatever makes you happy. So in this case, I've already got this revolved, but I can just grab the control vertices for this curve, and I can reshape the cherry and get it looking exactly the way I want it to. Just make sure that your bottom two vertices stay directly across from each other. If they don't, you're going to end up with a point at the middle of your cherry, and now it looks like a tiny little apple. Which, I mean, it's fine if you want to make a tiny little apple, I suppose. And there we go. We have a cherry. How did he mirror? Risen Force, did I mirror? Anybody tell me, did I mirror? Who gets cookie? No, I didn't mirror. MMO dust was all over it. I just revolved, just like we did with the plate. That is found under the Surfaces menu set, so you're going to press F4 and go to Surfaces and choose Revolve. Oh yeah, if you're having trouble tweaking the curve because of the mesh, just move the mesh to the side. I wouldn't do that. I mean, you can do that, but I wouldn't. You can just take, what he's saying is you can take the mesh and move it over here and then still make updates. That's cool, I just don't find it all that intuitive. I would much rather make use of my selection system to switch off the ability to select surfaces. So you just turn that off up here in the status line. And in doing that, all you can select now is that curve. So just select the curve and then right mouse out here in space and grab your control vertices, and now everything is nice and intuitive. But I mean, if you want to move it out to the side, that's totally cool. I would just prefer to do it this way if it was me. Okay, let's do a quick ready check to see who's got a cherry. With that, we need to create our stem. Now there's a lot of different ways to create our stem. The way we're going to do it is with a polygon cylinder. Now, the way I built my stem in my demo scene, it already had a bend in it. We could probably talk at length as to whether or not that's a good idea. We're going to do it anyway, mostly for academic purposes, but you don't necessarily have to work that way. Let me jump over to a side view, a real side view. I'm going to take my curve for the cherry. I am happy with this cherry, by the way, and I'm going to delete it. So that's just like deleting the history on my cherry. Now, I'm going to go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and I want to make a cylinder. I'd really like this cylinder to be right in the center of that cherry. What's one way I can go about doing that? We've already seen it tonight. Come on. Who knows? I want to make this stem right here on this cherry. Make it live. Raven wins. There you go. So we'll select our cherry, modify, make live. Good job. I'll go to polygons and just click on cylinder, and I'm going to make a tiny little cylinder right here and drag up to make a height. Even that's a little bit big, but that's okay. It's got a little bit of rotation, so I'm going to zero out its rotation, point it straight up and down. You can also kind of move it so it's dead center of the cherry, but if it's a little bit off, nobody's going to know. You might have seen in my final render it's pretty tiny. Once you're happy with its general location, though, deselect everything, go to Modify, and choose Make Not Live. That was just a temporary thing, so we could get that right there. Next, check out your input node. I'm going to take the radius of my stem and pull it way down. In fact, it looks like I need to punch in some numbers or slow my my virtual sliders back down like I did before. So in my case, something around 0.075 or so looks pretty good. I do not need this many subdivisions around the axis, though. So I'm going to pull that all the way down to 6. Now I get to show you something cool. You guys want to see something cool? Coolness always makes me happy. I'm going to take my height and pull that down. So this stem is going to be really short. You see, it doesn't even stick out of the top of the cherry, but watch this. I'm going to go back to create and make another CV curve tool. There is an EP curve. It's just a different algorithm to create a curve. I don't really like it. So I'm going to go back to CV curve. Now, watch carefully. Are you watching carefully? Good. To help me as a visual aid, I'm going to go to Shading and turn on Wireframe on Shaded. That's just to make me feel better. I told you guys I'd go a little bit more into snapping, and we're going to use a different form of snapping right now. I'm going to hold down the V key. V is in vertex snapping. You can see it blinking up here as I tap the V key in my status line. Holding down the V key, I'm going to click right in the center of that stem, and that puts my first point of the curve right there, dead center on top of that vertex. That's exactly where I want it. Before I draw another point, though, I'm going to go back to the side view. Now I can see my whole cherry. I'm going to hold down Shift, create my next point, and then just click just a couple more times. I don't really need that much. You have to have 4 points to make a CV curve. So in this case, 4 is all I need. Now that's not the cool part. Nor is the fact that I have a curve sprouting perfectly out of the center of my stem, which is kind of neat, but that's not the cool part. Here is the cool part. If I select that little stem surface that I've been working on, hold down the right mouse button and choose Faces. Watch this. If I hit Q to get that move tool out of my way, if I grab all 6 of these faces, then hold down Shift and select that curve, you might, and I stress might, have to hold down the right mouse button and choose Object Mode to do that. But you should be okay. You should be able to just hold down Shift and select that curve. You can now go to Shift, right mouse, just like we did before, and do an extrusion, and watch what happens. The extrusion snaps out to the end of the curve. But wait, it actually gets better. Scroll down in your properties for your extrusion. Remember divisions? We played with that before. Watch what happens when you increase it. That looks pretty good. So 5 divisions seem to work pretty well. Then we can take our taper and pull that down a little bit. Now, who needs to see me do that again? Okay. Undoing all the way back. I'm not going to redo the stem. We'll leave the stem right there. I'm going to assume you guys can do that. It's just a 6-sided cylinder anyway. A very tiny one. Okay. Second, last time, so pay close attention this time. Take notes if you need to. Create CV Curve Tool. Hold down the V key. What does V do? Anybody tell me right now. I need somebody to tell me in 5, 4, 3. Oh, awesome. Dust is all over. It's Vertex Snap. Awesome cookie. You get like a super cookie for being that fast. Raven says you snap to vertexes. All right, so we're going to hold down V and click right there at the center of that cylinder. Then jump to a side view. Hold down Shift to create your second point. That just means your curve will start off going in a straight line, which is going to be nice. Then click a couple more times. You just need a couple more points to create the rest of your stem. If you want to, you can even reshape this a little bit. So you can add just the right amount of little curvature. I wouldn't add a lot of curvature at this stage, just as a warning, but you could. You make it curl if you felt like it. But this will do. So, ready check. Everybody who is following along, do you either have the stem done, so you're ready, or you have your cylinder and your curve, so you're ready. If you have anything else, you should set your status to 1 minute right now. K-I-rec. K-I-rec. E-I-oo. With extra vowel sounds. You should be done now. Psycho Bolt. Come on now. You got this. It's snapping oddly. It's snapping to the cherry and not the cylinder. Are you sure you're holding down V and not C? All right, well, let's take a look at your screen. Give me your real name, though. Again, making these associations with so many different students can be a little bit of a pain. You are Ben. 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 All right, I guess there's only one. Make presenter.
Hello?
Hello!
Is it showing the right screen? I can't tell.
I see Maya.
Okay.
You're still set to make live. Turn that off. Now, show me what your problem is, man.
Create CVE. There we go. Okay, yeah, it was snapping as if the cherry would make live.
No, I'm not sure what the problem was. It must be just one of those things where the instructor comes in and suddenly everything starts working. I know how it is. No problem at all. So, I'll go ahead and take control back.
Sounds good.
And I'll thank you very much, Ben. Okay, cool. All right, so now you've got a curve, you've got your surface. Simply select your faces. 1, 2. Actually, let me get my move tool out of the way by hitting Q. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then hold down Shift and select your curve. Shift right mouse, extrude face. Your extrusion should jump right to the end of the curve. That's how that works. Then increase your divisions on the extrusion. Remember, it's on that input node you created with poly extrude face. So click on divisions and just increase that. I liked setting mine to around 5. Then you can pull down your taper, and you see how that tapers down right there at the base. That's it, but we're not done yet. I still have those faces at the very end selected, so I'm going to hold down Shift and right mouse and extrude again. I'll pull these out and scale them out a little bit. Then I'll click this little ring here, and I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily rotate these. I don't really care where they go. Just get a little rotated and look interesting. I'll extrude one more time, pull this out, and scale down nice and tiny. And that's it. That's my cherry stem. You can hit the 3 key and see what that looks like. Now I'm going to give you guys a tip. Earlier, how did we delete history on the cherry? Anybody? Anyone? Bueller? Yep, we killed the curve. That's a nice way to delete history. Try that real quick. Select your curve and hit delete and watch what happens. You lose that extrusion. That is because the way the extrude command works with a curve, it's dependent on the existence of that curve. So what you have to do is select your surface and go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Then you can delete the curve. I'll give you this little tip. You're going to forget this maybe between now and when we rig up for animation, or maybe you'll remember it because you might write it down, or maybe you have a really good memory. We could keep that curve and use it for animating later. You guys want to see how real quick, even though it's outside the scope of what I want to show you right now? You want to see anyway? I'll show you. I'll do it. Here you go. Watch this. I'm going to grab this curve real quick. I'm going to press F2 to go to the animation menu set. I'm going to go to Create Deformers and go down to Point on Curve, like so. Oh, it didn't work right. You know why? Because I didn't choose a point on curve first. Let's make sure to grab a curve point. Whoops. Drag that right up to the end of the curve. Go to Create Deformers, and then go to Point on Curve. And we get this locator, right? But this locator's pivot is sitting way out here in space for no reason whatsoever, and that's stupid. So we're going to go to Modify and center up the pivot of this guy, and watch what happens now when I move this locator. See? Oh, my goodness. The stem is moving. It's like a big tentacle, and I can reach out and grab things. I can make it lick the side of the interface. Watch. It just did that, and we're done. Now, I'm going to undo all that. And I'm totally going to make you forget that I ever did that. So now let's go to Edit, Delete by Type, Kill History, kill out my curve, and now we're just going to continue on with the video. All right, so you guys now have a cherry. You have a cake. You have some whipped cream on top, you have a plate, and you have a table. We're done. Everybody is happy. We are finished. So this is it for today's class. Your homework... and I'm not going to bother with writing all this out on the board. I'm sure you guys can gather this just from watching the video. But your homework is to get these assets done. And I would like you very much, and I'm going to make this a soft requirement. Now, when I say a soft requirement, here's what I mean. If you absolutely can't be bothered, or if the stress is too much and your head is in your hands and you're sobbing, then just give me this. If you're up for the challenge and you want to better yourself, make one more piece of something that belongs on a table. I don't care if it's a fork, a knife. You can do an entire flatware set if you want to. Make me maybe a coffee cup or a teacup or piano. Make something that should also be on this table, but I'm going to leave the decision up to you. Now, that is a soft requirement. I'm not saying you absolutely have to do it. I think it'd be cool. I'd greatly appreciate it. It shows me that you're learning more than just exactly the things that I show you and nothing else. And whether or not you get a cookie is dependent on how good of a job you do. So I'll go ahead and get a homework thread put up. Well, I'll go ahead and do that now as soon as we get off the horn here. But I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, so that is going to wrap things up for everybody. Thank you all for attending tonight's class. And I will try to get this video up tonight, but I actually have a stack of videos I have to put up from yesterday as well. So it's all going to depend on how quickly I can get stuff encoded and uploaded, and all that stuff actually takes a little bit of time. But I will put my best foot forward. It will be tomorrow at the latest, though, okay? So, I mean, it may just have to be tomorrow. It's already 9:30 here, if you guys didn't already know, and I have been jamming since about 9:30 this morning. So, that is going to wrap things up for this class. Thank you all very much. What about texturing? Well, Kenneth, we're not going to texture. Don't you remember earlier on? Hang on. Wait a minute. This is just for Kenneth. Kenneth, doesn't your final result already look like this? Because, I mean, if it doesn't, then you did it wrong, man. You've got to start all over again. Everybody else has this, don't you guys? Doesn't everybody else in BuzzNet have this? Yeah, see, like Risen Force has got it, Waz has got it, Flash has got it, Dak Daniels has it. Yeah, see, MMODest already has donuts and everything, too. So I'm worried about you, Kenneth. I think maybe you're a little bit behind. No, I'm just kidding, of course. This is the final render. We haven't done any texturing. We haven't done any materials. We're going to do all of that later in a separate class. I'm just giving you a hard time because it's late at night and I'm a little bit loopy. So, thank you all very much. And I will catch you all either next week, if I'm not going to see you again until Tuesday, or for those of you who are attending both sessions because you need twice the pain and punishment, then I will see you on Thursday, I suppose. I'll throw this out, and this is just kind of a final thing. If you want to, if you don't want your cherry to be perfect, like a perfect revolve, remember to take a few of your random CVs here and just kind of push and pull them around to make this guy a little bit oblong. I mean, nature doesn't ever make anything that's totally ever perfect. So make this guy a little bit irregular, and he will look a little bit better. Anyway, that's just for those of you who've kind of, hung out and watch that last tip at the end. I mean, even that really looks a whole lot better than it did. If I go over to shading and turn off wireframe on shaded, that looks a lot more like a Bing Cherry now. Anyway, that's it. That's all. You guys have yourselves a good night, and I will catch you later.